The chamber of the Galactic Council was a marvel of architecture, carved into the side of a hollowed asteroid that drifted in the quiet reaches of neutral space. Transparent walls revealed the endless sprawl of stars beyond, a silent reminder of the vast domain under Council influence. Inside, the air shimmered faintly with the hum of translation fields, ensuring that every delegate heard the same words no matter their native tongue or sound. Representatives from 40 worlds sat in tiered rings, each in their own environmental field, some in shimmering water-filled orbs, others surrounded by thin layers of methane vapor, still others seated in open air. At the very center, the council speaker stood on a raised platform, her voice carrying the weight of countless prior decrees. Today's matter was already decided in whispers and private channels long before the formal vote would be cast. The topic was Earth. No one called it by its galactic designation, Sol 3. In the council chamber, the name Earth carried a certain sharpness. For decades, humans had been a minor curiosity, an emerging species from the edge of charted space, remarkable only for the speed of their technological growth and their stubborn refusal to submit to galactic oversight. At first, their independence had been tolerated. Then, it had become a point of concern. Now, it was considered a threat. The human problem cannot be ignored any longer, declared the representative from the Trivaran cluster, a tall, crystalline figure whose body caught the light in 100 fractured patterns. They refuse trade regulations. They reject council arbitration. They expand beyond their planetary system without approval. And most concerning, they have defied every attempt at peaceful guidance. There were murmurs of agreement from many sectors. The council had rules that kept thousands of worlds in harmony. To them, humanity's refusal to comply was not bravery, but disorder. A representative from the gas giant colonies of Calth spoke next, their voice resonating like rolling thunder. They are unpredictable. Their history is filled with conflict, yet they advance faster than any young species we have known. If they continue unchecked, they will disrupt the balance we have built for millennia. Screens above the chamber displayed archival footage, grainy transmissions from human history, rockets tearing through the atmosphere, machines roving across barren moons, metallic vessels launching into the black with bold, uncalculated trajectories. The humans never moved cautiously, never paused to ask permission. They acted first and solved problems later, a pattern alien to most council civilizations. The speaker raised a hand for silence. The proposal is to initiate a controlled occupation of Earth and its territories. The humans will be integrated into the Council's governance structure for their own stability. The fleets are prepared. Resistance is expected to be minimal. No one openly disagreed. A few leaned back in their seats, calculating the political gains this decision would bring. Others nodded with quiet approval, seeing the move as a necessary safeguard. A handful remained silent, not out of support, but out of resignation. Once the council moved toward consensus, reversal was rare. When the vote was called, luminous orbs appeared before each representative, glowing with the choice they would make. One by one, hands, tendrils, claws, or appendages touched the orbs, sending their decision into the collective system. The chamber lights dimmed for only a breath before the result appeared in massive characters above them. Decision passed. 39 in favor, 1 abstention, 0 opposed. The speaker inclined her head, her voice calm yet final. Then it is agreed. The fleets will mobilize within 3 rotations. Earth will be brought under council authority. Outside the chamber, the news spread instantly across subspace channels. Captains received sealed orders. Warships began adjusting their flight paths toward the Sol system. In the military yards of distant worlds, engineers loaded fresh armaments into carrier holds. Even the smallest escort craft was fitted with systems designed to disable human technology without total destruction. This was to be an occupation, not an annihilation. Within the chamber, the delegates resumed quieter conversations, already turning to the next matter on the agenda. Yet far away on a small blue world lit by a single yellow star, no one knew the decision had been made. Not yet. The void between stars rippled faintly as the Council fleet translated into real space on the edge of the Sol system. One by one, their warships emerged from the distortion, their hulls reflecting the cold light of the distant sun. The fleet was a display of order and discipline, rows of sleek destroyers, massive carriers with hangar doors yawning open, and the flagship Verdict of Harmony at the formation's heart, her surface shimmering with layered shield fields. From this position, Earth was still just a pale blue point, barely distinguishable from the background stars. The human homeworld was distant, yet already locked within the targeting grids of dozens of capital ships. Admiral Sarrett stood on the command deck of the Verdict, watching the status readouts scroll across the main holodisplay. "Begin suppression. Protocols," he ordered. Within seconds, pulses of directed energy lanced outward from specialized frigates, flooding human communication bands with static. Civilian satellites orbiting Earth and Mars flickered with interference before going dark entirely. Orbital navigation systems faltered. Even deep space buoys, those automated beacons humans use to guide vessels through asteroid belts, went silent. To the Council fleet, it was the opening step of a routine operation. "Signal interference confirmed," reported Lieutenant Keln, her tone measured. "Planetary response? None so far." Sarrett nodded with satisfaction. "Exactly, as expected. But not everyone on the bridge felt the same ease." Keln's eyes lingered on the scrolling telemetry. It wasn't the lack of a military reaction that unsettled her. It was the total absence of any detectable activity at all. No scramble codes from orbital defense stations, no emergency launches from surface facilities, not even panic broadcasts from civilian networks. In previous occupations, even the most primitive worlds reacted with chaos once communications were severed. Here, there was nothing but silence. The fleet began its advance inward, ships sliding into pre-planned attack vectors. Carriers deployed squadrons of small craft, each one fanning out to establish orbital dominance over key human cities. Automated drones streaked ahead toward known military installations, ready to deploy non-lethal suppression munitions. Far below, on Earth, the night sky over the Pacific Ocean briefly brightened as the first wave of Council craft entered low orbit. To the untrained eye, they might have appeared as streaking meteors or passing satellites. Few on the surface noticed. Fewer still understood what they were seeing. In orbit, a frigate captain reported an anomaly. "Sir, we're reading multiple transponder pings on civilian frequencies. Origin, unknown. They are bouncing between old, decommissioned relay points." Sarrett dismissed it without much thought. "Civilian remnants. Ignore them. Focus on disabling. Planetary launch capabilities." The order was acknowledged, but the anomaly didn't vanish. It grew. The pings began to multiply, moving in patterns that suggested coordination, yet no source could be pinpointed. Meanwhile, over Mars, a small squadron approached an abandoned human shipyard. The docks appeared lifeless, their structures drifting in silence. But as the alien craft closed in, the dark hulls of half-finished human ships suddenly flared with power. Engines ignited, weapons, improvised, crude by Council standards, opened fire without warning. The alien formation scattered, shields flaring under the unexpected barrage. On the Verdict, Keln's console came alive with new reports. "We are taking resistance at multiple points. Small scale but coordinated, they're hitting our recon units, not the main fleet." Sarrett turned to her, his voice calm. "Let them. The more they reveal their positions now, the quicker we end this." Keln gave a short nod, but her thoughts were elsewhere. The humans weren't reacting like a panicked prey species. They were holding back, striking only when it gave them an advantage. It was almost as if they had planned for this exact scenario. By the time the fleet reached Earth's orbit, most orbital infrastructure had been disabled. The planet hung before them, blue oceans and green continents framed by thin clouds. To the Council commanders, it was the image of victory waiting to be claimed, and yet the silence from the surface remained, steady, unbroken, and deliberate. From high above the Earth, the Council fleet's scanners swept over the continents, oceans, and skies. They found nothing that resembled an organized defense network. The known military bases, mapped long before the invasion, appeared abandoned. Runways lay empty, hangars stood with their doors open, and not a single human aircraft was detected in the air. On the bridge of the Verdict of Harmony, Admiral Sarrett studied the readouts with a growing sense of satisfaction. "They have scattered," he said, his voice carrying to every station. "Without coordination, they will be absorbed quickly." Lieutenant Keln wasn't so certain. Her console displayed a wide-spectrum scan of the planet, and the readings were wrong. Heat signatures were irregular, almost too clean, as though someone had deliberately masked them. Communication traffic was minimal, but the gaps were unnatural, precise enough to suggest deliberate suppression, not chaos. She turned to Sarrett. "Admiral, I believe their forces are concealed. We're not seeing their true positions." Sarrett gave her a faint smile. "Lieutenant, I have studied human behavior for years. They are bold, yes, but not subtle. This," he gestured at the hollow readings, "is panic." Still, Keln's eyes stayed fixed on her display. She had seen primitive worlds fall before, but none had gone quiet like this. Silence was a choice, and in warfare it could be as dangerous as open fire. The fleet began its descent into lower orbits. Drone swarms detached from the carriers, diving through the atmosphere to scout cities and industrial zones. Their visual feeds showed eerily calm streets. Traffic lights still cycled. Markets stood open but without customers. In some neighborhoods, doors swung on their hinges as if residents had left in a hurry. Then, without warning, one of the forward drone clusters over North America lost signal. Seconds later, another vanished over the Indian Ocean. The loss was quiet. No explosions, no visible enemy fire. They simply ceased transmitting. "Cause of signal drop?" Sarrett demanded. "Unknown, sir," replied the comms officer. "Interference is localized and spreading." A junior sensor technician spoke up, hesitating before delivering her report. "Sir, it appears they are pulling us into dead zones." Keln's attention snapped toward the officer. "Dead zones? You mean areas with no signal relay, no external visibility?" "Yes, Lieutenant," the technician confirmed. "But these zones were not present in our original maps." Across the fleet, the losses continued. Recon craft vanished in patterns that began to form a disturbing outline. Not random, but targeted, as if the humans were drawing an invisible boundary in the sky. Down on the surface, far from the view of orbiting ships, hidden defense stations, powered up deep within mountains, under oceans, and in the heart of civilian-looking structures. Camouflaged launch tubes disguised as communication towers slid open. Railgun arrays emerged from false hillsides. Under the cover of silence, the humans had prepared an entirely different battlefield. In the dark waters of the Pacific, a submarine fleet surfaced just long enough to release swarms of unmanned attack drones into the waves. Each one was shielded from detection, programmed to rise and strike at precise coordinates. On the Verdict, Sarrett still held the belief that resistance was disorganized. But even he noticed the shift when the first Council frigate in low orbit shuddered under impact from a high-velocity projectile. Moments later, 2 more ships reported critical hull breaches. "They've opened fire," Keln said, her voice low but steady. Sarrett frowned. "From where?" "Everywhere," she answered. The main display lit up with impact markers across the planet. None were concentrated in a single location. Instead, they came from dozens of points at once, each one vanishing immediately after. Firing. The humans weren't defending in a conventional sense. They were hunting, striking like predators, and fading back into the terrain. In the council chamber light years away, the delegates who had voted for the invasion would not yet know of these first losses. But here, in the cold skies above Earth, the fleet's confidence had begun to fracture. The silence was no longer the sound of surrender. It was the sound of a trap being sprung. In the hours that followed the first sudden strikes, the Council fleet adjusted its formations, pulling heavier ships into defensive orbits. Recon drones fanned out again, this time in tighter patterns, while escort craft patrolled the space between capital ships and the planet below. On paper, the Council still held overwhelming superiority. But every officer on the bridge of the verdict of harmony could feel it. Control was slipping. The attacks came without warning and from every direction. High-velocity slugs from railguns hidden under cities, directed energy bursts from structures disguised as weather towers, and then something even stranger, massive chunks of space debris, some no larger than a crate, others the size of small ships drifting toward the fleet in unpredictable arcs. When the first carrier tried to push through a debris field, dozens of pieces altered course mid-drift, accelerating with unnatural precision. Impacts rippled across its hull before its shields could respond. "Admiral, the debris is being guided," Keln reported, her voice urgent. "We're detecting micro-thrusters, minimal emissions, almost impossible to spot until it's too late." Sarrett's brow furrowed. "Debris fields do not pilot themselves. Where is it coming from?" Keln expanded the tactical map, revealing faint trails that led not to any known station, but to asteroid belts further out in the system. "Sir, I believe the humans have converted mining operations into weapons platforms." The room fell quiet for a moment. Mining in asteroid fields was common among young civilizations, but weaponizing them was another matter entirely. It required patience, engineering, and foresight, none of which the Council had expected from a species they still considered inexperienced. As if to confirm her theory, a warning klaxon blared. Multiple destroyers stationed near the orbit of Mars reported incoming projectiles from beyond the red planet. Moments later, the feed from one vessel cut out, replaced by the grainy image of its shattered hull tumbling into darkness. Keln's console lit with new data. "Admiral, they've placed launchers on moving asteroids. They're firing and letting the asteroid's natural trajectory hide their location." Sarrett's voice hardened. "Destroy them." "Already trying, sir," Keln replied, "but they're retreating into the field after each strike." In another sector, a Council cruiser detected an object approaching from above the ecliptic plane, a vector almost no fleets used. By the time they realized it was a modified satellite, it had already discharged a payload of kinetic rods, each one plummeting toward the ship's vulnerable dorsal side. Shields flared, but 3 impacts punched through, crippling its maneuvering. Systems. What the Council had assumed were ordinary human satellites were, in fact, disguised launch systems. Some had been in orbit for years, quietly dormant until now. From the safety of underground command centers on Earth, human operators watched it all unfold on encrypted screens. The war rooms were not concentrated in one city or even one country. They were scattered across continents, connected by a network the Council couldn't detect. Orders were simple: hit and vanish, never fire twice from the same location, and make the enemy waste time searching for ghosts. In orbit around the moon, another surprise waited. A field of harmless-looking construction drones activated in unison, linking together into a massive framework. Within minutes, the structure had become a makeshift railgun array, firing a single enormous slug at a Council battleship in low Earth orbit. The shot didn't destroy the ship, but it ripped through one of its main hangars, scattering fighters into uncontrolled spins. By the time the Council identified the source, the railgun was already dismantling itself, the drones scattering in different directions to blend back into lunar industry. Sarah stood at the command display, staring at the spreading web of red threat markers across the system. "They have turned their entire star system into a weapon," he said slowly, as, if saying it aloud might make it less absurd, Keln didn't look up from her console, "and they've been building it under our noses for years." For the first time since entering the Sol system, Sarah felt something unfamiliar creeping in, doubt, and far from the Council fleet's awareness, in the cold shadows beyond Neptune, the next stage of humanity's plan was already moving into place. By the third day in the Sol system, the Council fleet was still holding position, but the shape of the war had shifted. The humans were no longer just striking from hidden positions. They were inside the fleet's mind. It began with the communications. At first, the interference was the expected kind: bursts of static, scrambled messages, distorted relay signals. But then the patterns changed. On one carrier, a pilot's personal channel suddenly came alive with a familiar voice, his sister, speaking in their home dialect, telling him to leave the battle. He froze at his controls, swearing it was real. On another ship, a navigation officer reported hearing what sounded like a Council distress call, but when the source was traced, it came from a buoy that hadn't existed an hour earlier. "Lieutenant," Keln recognized the tactic immediately. "They're infiltrating our comm networks," she told Admiral Sarret. "Not just jamming, they're mimicking trusted voices and commands." "Impossible," Sarret replied, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. "Our encryption is—" Before he could finish, every display on the verdict of harmony flickered. The clean blue of the Council's tactical interface dissolved into grainy footage of destroyed warships drifting in space. The ships bore Council markings, their hulls split open as fires raged within. No one recognized the battle. It hadn't happened. The image lingered just long enough for the silence on the bridge to turn heavy before the Council interface returned as if nothing had changed. "Visual intrusion," Keln said sharply. "They're not just hacking, they're staging scenes to make us think the battle's already lost. But it wasn't only the officers being targeted. Across the fleet, enlisted crews reported strange sounds in their quarters, footsteps. In empty corridors, doors opening without command, brief glimpses of figures that vanished when approached. Security teams swept entire sections, only to find nothing. Morale began to fray. A gunner on the Pledge of Accord swore his weapons targeting system was giving false readings, showing enemy ships where there was only empty space. When he hesitated to fire, his section commander reprimanded him, only to find the same phantom contacts minutes later. In the mess halls, rumors spread of human infiltration units boarding ships unseen, moving through ventilation shafts, sabotaging systems from within. No such intruders were ever captured, but the fear was enough to slow efficiency and break coordination. Keln studied the patterns and began to see the larger design. "They're not trying to destroy our fleet outright," she told Sarret in a private briefing. "They're undermining our trust in our own systems. Every second we hesitate, they gain ground." To prove her point, she pulled up a transmission intercepted earlier that day. The message began as a human voice speaking. "Fluent Council Standard, we do not fear you. We do not run from you. We are everywhere you are not looking." Then the audio fractured into static and reformed into a Council commander's own voice giving a retreat order. Sarret's jaw tightened. "Send a fleet-wide alert. Verify all orders through direct chain of command confirmation only. No relays, no automated responses." Even as he spoke, the verdict's forward sensor array began projecting ghost fleets, readings of massive enemy formations where none existed. Several escort captains repositioned their ships to intercept these phantoms, creating sudden, dangerous gaps in the fleet's real defenses. The humans never pressed the advantage immediately. Instead, they let the false threats linger, forcing the council commanders to waste energy and focus on shadows. At the same time, propaganda signals began broadcasting openly on every unsecured channel. The footage was simple. Human soldiers, in mismatched armor, some laughing, some calmly cleaning weapons, others staring silently into the camera. Beneath the imagery, a single line of text scrolled in dozens of galactic languages. "We are still here." By the end of the fourth day, Admiral Sarret had ordered all non-essential communications cut and visual feeds strictly monitored, but the damage was done. Crews no longer trusted their sensors, and every unexpected sound or flicker of light was enough to set nerves on edge. Somewhere down on Earth, in a hidden operations hub, a human communications officer leaned back in his chair, watching the Council fleet from a secure orbital feed. "They don't know what's real anymore," he said to his commander with a faint smile. The commander didn't look up from her screen. "Good. That's when they make mistakes." On the morning of the fifth day in the Sol system, the verdict of harmony began its standard systems check. The flagship's operations had been tightened since the mind games began. Triple verification. Protocols, manual overrides on critical controls, and constant visual confirmation for every command. On paper, this made the vessel more secure than it had been at launch, but humans weren't looking for weak locks. They were looking for doors no one knew existed. At 03:14 fleet time, the verdict's central power grid flickered, only for a moment, barely long enough for the lighting to dim. But in that heartbeat of darkness, every screen on the bridge went black. Then they lit again, not with council systems, but with a single, crisp human image. It was a close-up of a human face. The figure wore no helmet, no insignia. Their expression was calm, almost conversational. In fluent council standard, they spoke. "We told you we were not afraid." The voice carried through every corridor of the ship. Engineering crews stopped. Mid-step, weapons teams froze at their consoles. Even in the captain's private quarters, the broadcast was unavoidable. The human continued. "You came here to bring us under control. You assumed we would break. But we have been preparing for you since the day we learned we were not alone." The feed cut to a series of rapid images. Council ships crippled in orbit, planetary defense stations the fleet had never detected, and what looked like war preparations stretching back decades. The implication was clear. This had never been a war of surprise. The humans had been waiting. Then, without warning, the image dissolved, replaced by the verdict's internal schematics. Every deck, every corridor, every crew position marked in real time. And over that, a glowing red symbol pulsed where the ship's central reactor sat. "Admiral Sarret," the human voice continued, "you have exactly one decision left to make today. Stay and lose everything, or leave and keep what you still command." The feed went black. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of life support systems. Then voices broke out in urgent debate. Engineers demanding to know how the intruders accessed their closed networks, security officers shouting for immediate lockdowns, tactical officers insisting they should press the attack before the enemy could exploit the breach. Sarret raised a hand for quiet. His voice was steady, but his jaw was rigid. "Status of the reactor?" "Normal, sir," replied the chief engineer. "But I can't confirm whether that display was real or simulated. If they can tap into our core readouts, they can feed us anything they want." Keln spoke next, her tone low but sharp. "Sir, they've just demonstrated that they can reach us anywhere. If they can make the crew believe the ship is compromised, that belief alone can dismantle our command." The truth of her words became visible only minutes later. On two of the fleet's smaller carriers, crews refused to leave docked positions, convinced that phantom enemy boarding parties were already aboard. On another destroyer, a group of gunners abandoned their posts entirely, certain their vessel had been targeted for destruction. None of these threats were confirmed, but the panic was real. The mutiny began quietly, orders questioned, protocols delayed, but it spread like a crack through ice. On the Pledge of Accord, an entire deck, crew sealed themselves in their quarters and refused to respond to Central Command. By midday, 5 ships were operating below minimum staffing, and 3 more had broken formation entirely, retreating to what they claimed were safer positions. For the first time, Sarett realized the fleet was no longer a unified force. The enemy had not needed to destroy their ships, only their cohesion. Keln stepped close to the Admiral's station. "Sir, if this continues, you won't have a fleet to command. You'll have a scattering of frightened captains making their own choices." Sarett said nothing. The holographic map of the Sol system floated before him, bright with the positions of his ships. But between them were empty spaces, gaps in the once perfect formation that looked to him like the first signs of collapse. And somewhere on Earth, the humans who had orchestrated this moment were already preparing their next move. The morning of the 6th day broke with no battle cries, no opening volleys. The Council fleet hung in orbit like a fractured constellation, the once pristine lines of warships now marked by uneven spacing and shifting formations. Ships drifted, a few kilometers off their assigned stations, their captains adjusting position on personal judgment rather than central command orders. Admiral Sarett stood at the viewport of the verdict of harmony, his hands clasped behind his back. It was not the humans' weaponry that had done this. No planetary bombardment had shattered his fleet. The destruction here was invisible, rooted in doubt, in hesitation, in the gnawing belief that every signal, every reading, might be a trick. The far side of the formation, the Pledge of Accord, spun slowly, her thrusters firing in short bursts. She was not damaged. Her captain was simply unwilling to hold steady in what he believed to be a kill zone. Several destroyers kept their weapons powered down, citing phantom heat spikes in their reactors. "Sir," Keln said from her station, "2 more captains have requested clearance to reposition closer to the fleet's outer edge. They're citing tactical safety." Sarett didn't respond immediately. He studied the holographic map of the Sol system. Earth remained at its center, a bright, blue and green marble encased in a sphere of orbital defenses and cloaked positions. The human fleet, or what the sensors insisted was the human fleet, had shifted slightly, but they were still in range to strike. "Approve their requests," Sarett said finally. His voice was flat, but Keln caught the undertone. He was letting them drift away. Moments later, a new signal broke across the command deck. It was not an intrusion this time. No false image, no stolen voice. It was an open broadcast, unencrypted, designed for everyone to hear. "This is the voice of Earth," the transmission began. The speaker was calm, almost weary. "We see you struggling. We see your formation breaking. We know your fleet no longer moves as one. You can keep fighting us, but each day you remain here, more of your unity will dissolve. And you will go home not as conquerors, but as the memory of a force that was." The words settled over the bridge like a weight. Sarett could hear his crew shifting uneasily. The broadcast continued. "We will not chase you if you choose to leave now. We will not attack you as you retreat. This is your chance to preserve what remains of your command." The channel closed. No threats, no ultimatums. Just the offer. Sarett turned to Keln. "They want us to leave. They know you won't. Order a retreat unless they make it look like your decision," she said quietly. "They're letting you save face." For the next hour, Sarett listened to his captain's reports. The requests to reposition had become requests for withdrawal, disguised as tactical redeployments. Several ships had already begun edging toward the system's outer rim, claiming the move was temporary. The truth was plain. The retreat had already begun, only without the formal order. Finally, Sarret spoke the words his pride had been resisting. "Signal the fleet. We are adjusting our operational position. Begin coordinated withdrawal to the outer edge of the system. Maintain formation." The order went out, and the movement began. Slowly at first, then more decisively. The fleet peeled back from Earth, warships turning their bows away from the planet that had refused to yield. The humans did nothing to hinder them. No fighters darted in to harass the retreat. No artillery fire shadowed their course. Instead, the human ships kept station, silent and steady, watching. From the verdict's bridge, Sarret saw Earth growing smaller in the viewport. Yet the sense of defeat did not come from the shrinking image. It came from the knowledge that the humans had orchestrated every step of this withdrawal. He had not been beaten in battle. He had been led out like a guest leaving a hall where they no longer belonged. Keln broke the silence. "Sir, they let us leave intact." "Why?" Sarret didn't answer immediately. He was already thinking about what awaited him when he returned to the council. The questions, the doubts, the slow erosion of his authority. The humans didn't need to destroy his ships. They had planted something far more dangerous in the minds of every captain here. An unshakable awareness that humanity could not be underestimated, and that awareness would spread. The return journey to council space was marked by silence. No celebratory comms, no post-mission chatter. Ships kept their channels quiet, speaking only when operational necessity demanded it. In the private space between commands, captains wrestled with the same quiet dread. They had come to conquer, and left without firing a decisive shot. Admiral Sarret spent the voyage in his quarters more often than on the bridge. He read reports from across the fleet, each one attempting to mask what had happened. Phrases like strategic repositioning and preservation of fleet resources appeared again and again, but the truth bled through in the details. Crew. Morale was fractured. Trust in Central Command was strained. Even those who had supported the invasion privately admitted the humans had been different. When the verdict of harmony finally slipped into the quiet lanes of council space, the weight of the journey seemed to lift slightly. The fleet passed the final patrol checkpoint and entered home territory. That was when it happened. The first signal arrived not from the council's command network, but from deep space. It was untraceable, routed through dozens of relay points, bouncing across asteroid stations and forgotten communication hubs. Yet every ship in the returning fleet received it at the exact same moment. Screens across every bridge lit up with a familiar face. The same human who had spoken to them in the Sol system. The voice was calm, unhurried, almost conversational. "Welcome. Home." A ripple of unease ran through the crews. No one touched the controls. No one dared interrupt. "You crossed light years to test us," the human continued. "You brought the strength of your fleets, your weapons, your pride. You thought we would submit because we were younger to the stars." The image leaned forward slightly. "We learned from you, from your broadcasts, from the stories that drifted into our networks. We learned not just your technology, but your patterns, your psychology, your fears." Behind the speaker, images began to play. Archival council footage of ancient victories, of worlds subdued, of fleets bowing in surrender. The point was unmistakable. Humanity knew their history. "We could have destroyed some of you," the voice said evenly. "We chose not to, because we wanted you to see something more dangerous than destruction." The images shifted again, this time to Earth's cities, its sprawling habitats, its orbital shipyards under construction. Millions of humans moved through the frames, unafraid, purposeful. "We wanted you to see that we are building still, that every year you hesitate, we grow stronger, that every year you underestimate us, we are ready for you in ways you cannot predict." Sarret felt the words sinking into the crew around him. This was no taunt. It was a statement of fact. Then came the final blow. "We will meet again." The humans said. When we do, it will not be because you come for us. It will be because we are ready to decide what happens next. The transmission ended. For a long moment, the bridge of the verdict of harmony was utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the engines as they cruised toward dock. Keln, standing at Saret's side, finally spoke. Sir, they reached us here, in our own territory, without detection. Saret didn't answer immediately. He looked out the viewport, seeing the distant shimmer of council stations, the comfort of home, but it no longer felt secure. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. They wanted us to understand that distance will not protect us. Keln nodded. And that the next time we meet, it will be on their terms. In the days that followed, rumors spread across the council worlds. Stories of how the Great Fleet had returned without victory, of how a younger species had faced them without fear. Some dismissed it as exaggeration. Others whispered it was only the beginning of a larger shift in the balance of the galaxy. But those who had been there, those who had seen the calm, unshaken eyes of the humans, knew the truth. Humanity was not a problem to be solved. They were a force to be reckoned with. And somewhere, on that small blue world, they were already preparing for the day they would decide to move outward.